Hi, my name is Tim Chrisman, and welcome to another Workforce for the Future Space Edition. I'm here in Montgomery, Alabama at MGM Works, a component of the Defense Works Accelerator Program, to talk about workforce for the future and how the U.S. is currently set up to educate its space workforce, how we can learn lessons from other times in history and options for how we might do space workforce better as we go forward. Before I start, I want to introduce Trent Edwards, the director here at MGM Works, so he can introduce the program, talk a little bit about Alabama, and then we'll go into the program where Shelly Brunswick, the Chief Operating Officer from the Space Foundation, will talk about the space workforce as it exists. Bill Britton will talk about the cyber corollaries to training the space workforce and how we might learn the lessons of what we did wrong there. And then I'll go into a discussion about where we can take that, where we can go. So without further ado, Trent.
Great. Thank you very much, Tim. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. Welcome, everyone. On behalf of Lieutenant Governor Will Ainsworth, who chairs the Alabama Military Stability Commission, of which I am a proud member, welcome. The state of Alabama has done some pretty incredible things to address workforce development, innovation, and education. And so we're proud to host this webinar, and let's talk about the future of space. How do we develop that workforce for the future that allows us to compete in a globally competitive environment? MGM Works is an innovation and collaboration hub. We believe in the power of innovation and collaboration to change lives, community, and the world. We're a connector. We're like Match.com, right? If you have a big idea, well, we have some pretty big challenges facing us. So we bring together the public and the private sector, academia, non-traditional actors, all of those folks into a space where they can collaborate and accelerate ideas so that we can compete in a global environment. Today's discussion is extremely important. How do we move to the left and build that workforce, starting with K through 12, through 2-year institutions, 4-year institutions, so that we can compete in a global environment? And that's what we do every day at MGM Works. We operate across 4 vertical lines of innovation: defense, education, workforce development, and social innovation. We're aligned with Air University, and we augment the academic men and women that attend Air University through Air War College, Air Command and Staff College, and SOS. And so in closing, there are 2 aspects of innovation, right? There's the product, there's the widget, there's the device, but there's also the mindset. And so we're very involved in helping change the way people think and address some of the most important challenges that we have ahead of us. That ability to critically think through issues and problem solve. And so, Tim, we're very excited and honored to host this webinar event. We're excited of where Alabama is going to support space and our role in Space Force and U.S. Space Command. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We look forward to a great conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Trent.
Thanks, Tim. Thank you very much.
All right. So I now have the pleasure to introduce Shelly Brunswick, the Chief Operating Officer of the Space Foundation, who, as many of you on this webinar know, is, if not the most active educator, communicator, and face in the space community. She's easily in the top 5. She is a tireless advocate for educating and preparing the next generation for living, working in and around space, and it's exciting to have her here. As we go through the event today, If you have questions, comments, you want to find out more about what we're talking about, there's social links on the screen right now at Facebook, at Twitter, on YouTube. And if you're on our site on the live stream, drop a question in, it'll be relayed to me here. We'll get it up and get it going. So with that, Shelly, over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Tim. I'm honored to be joining you and our esteemed panel with Bill and Leo and everyone. Thank you so much for making this possible. I wish I could be joining you today in Montgomery, Alabama, which is a great place, and honored to be joining you. What I'd like to do is we tested this. We'll see if it'll actually work again to bring my slides up. What I'd like to talk about is at the Space Foundation, we believe space for you, space for all, and talk about what that workforce development is and how that is so critical to our growing space ecosystem. And again, if you have questions, we were talking earlier, Tim, about how it is a little challenging with these virtual hybrid events. So if I were there in person, I could see your expressions, you could raise your hand, and we could actually have a dialogue. So Tim, please feel free if somebody in the audience has a question to relay that to me. I'd like this to make it a discussion versus a PowerPoint presentation, which we're all used to, having formerly been in the Air Force, that, death by PowerPoint. So Bill's nodding his head too. We wish we could be in person so that we could really have that dialogue. When we think about space, and especially at the Space Foundation, we're looking at how advocating for innovation betters our life here on Earth. And so really making that connection between going to space and the importance of that exploration, but then tying it back into how it enhances our life here on Earth and benefits us. So I like to share, when we think about the Space Foundation has 3 divisions, and many of you, if not most of you, are familiar with our one division called Symposium 365, which is the premier source for media and events. And this is the division that hosts our annual Space Symposium that takes place every year, minus COVID, in Colorado Springs at the Broadmoor. And we will be having Space Symposium in person in August at the Broadmoor, August 23rd through the 26th. It will also be a hybrid event as well, so people can also attend virtually. And then we're going to bridge our August event with next April 2022 with what we've launched, a virtual on-demand component called 365 that now operates 365 days a year. So most of you are familiar with that, and I hope that I will see you at Symposium. Our other pillar that many of you know is the Space Foundation is a U.S. nonprofit, and we do business internationally. And this falls under our Global Alliance, which is where our partnerships exist, both locally, nationally, and internationally. And then the component I'm going to talk to you about today is our Center for Innovation and Education, which is about that lifelong learning platform that allows workforce development and economic opportunity so all citizens can find their way into the space ecosystem. So at the Space Foundation, we want to be your trusted source for information, education, and collaboration. So why is space so important, and why do you want to be part of it, and why are we wanting to unlock this technology? Well, right now, according to Space Foundation, 2019, the global space ecosystem was $424 billion. And depending what analysts you listen to, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, Morgan Stanley, they're projecting that the global space ecosystem will be 1.4 trillion by 2030, and then over 3 trillion by 2040. So we have exponential growth taking place in this space ecosystem. More than 85 nations operate in space, and here in the US, the commercial space is 80% of that. And so when you think about that, again, that is great paying jobs, that is economic opportunity that allows all citizens to find their way into the space ecosystem. So many times when people think about space, we were talking earlier about, rockets and rocket scientists, and that is definitely part of the space ecosystem. But there's a number of other entry points and technology that are part of the space ecosystem. So data analytics, processing that information coming off satellites and other sensors. We need different energy and energy storage solutions. We need those to go to the moon and Mars, but we need those here on Earth. Healthcare and pharmaceutical development. We've seen the importance of how medical breakthroughs from space technology benefit us here on Earth. Advanced manufacturing. We saw during COVID how important that supply chain is, that manufacturing. So we need advanced manufacturing, artificial intelligence, virtual reality. And of course, Bill's going to talk about cybersecurity. So when you're thinking about technology, you're really thinking about space and technology, because space many times is that critical infrastructure. And for those of you who are wondering, where did I get all this great information about emerging technology? Well, and there's a great place, is the NASA Technology Transfer Office. So for those of you who are entrepreneurs and are looking for a great idea to commercialize, you can go to the NASA Technology Transfer Office. You can find patents that you can request an application for, and you can look at bringing that to market with a grant. Also, if we have international audience today, ESA also has a technology transfer office, as does Air Force Research Lab and the Department of Energy. So there are patents out there that are just waiting to be brought to market and commercialized. So again, I focus a lot on the commercialization side because again, that's where your workforce development and economic opportunity come from. So when you think about that space technology, think about your cell phone. We're all going to take some selfies today, and there's about 3 different types of space technology in your phone. Athletic shoes, cordless power tools. Also weather prediction. We're all starting to travel again. And the next time I get on an airplane, I really want to make sure the pilot has the best weather forecast to avoid any type of bad weather. Think about firefighters. They're wearing fire retardant clothing that came from the Apollo era, breast cancer detection, cataract surgery. So as we're moving forward in the rapidly changing environment and workforce that we live in, our environment is being enhanced by this space technology with Earth observation for better agricultural methods, tracking wildlife in Africa or pests such as locusts. We're looking at medical cures, better agricultural methods, so precision farming to better feed our planet. So when you think about space, think about how it's helping us here on Earth. Again, the Space Foundation comes out with its annual report saying what the global space ecosystem is. And this is the 2019 report. You'll see that the red and blue are that commercial sector. And in late July, we will be coming out with the 2020 numbers. So please stand by for that special space report announcement of what the 2020 global space ecosystem was and how well it was. For many individuals, 2020 was the year of COVID. However, space still had a very robust manufacturing, launches, and technology. So it was still a very good year for the space ecosystem. While individuals in other sectors may have been getting laid off or displaced from COVID, the space ecosystem was still in the process of hiring. So when I talk about there's a place for everyone in space, and this, Tim, again, is why we're so passionate about developing that workforce for the future, because now we need all workers to come into the space ecosystem. We're looking at non-STEM laborers. Again, we talked about manufacturing jobs, cybersecurity. Many times you can get a certificate and you can go into a great paying job. We're looking at artists. We're looking at business professionals. We're looking at entrepreneurs, as well as those STEM professionals. And we're looking at, since technology is rapidly changing, we all need to become lifelong learners. Immersive experiences, K through 12 or primary school, young adults reskilling and relearning. And again, mid-career upskilling and reskilling into new careers as new technology comes on board. So we're looking at a continuum of education now. The other big thing we're looking at the Space Foundation is how are we reaching out to underrepresented groups in the space ecosystem? So we could say minorities and women, but I want to say underrepresented groups because those groups could be inner city or rural communities or regions of the world. So let's really look at how we can engage with those underrepresented groups because we need them. And this is why we need them. Although the future looks really rosy for 2030, 2040, as that space ecosystem becomes very robust, there are three challenges that could hold us back from reaching that $3+ trillion economy in 2040. And that's a workforce shortage, a skills deficit, and an innovation gap. Here in America, as well as other developed countries, we're seeing a retirement of our baby boomers, and we're looking at where are those replacements coming from. We're looking at open jobs. There are more open jobs, as I said, in the space ecosystem than there are unemployed workers. So how are we reaching out to them? And we have an undertapped, underrepresented group that's not entered into the space ecosystem. And then when I talk about the skills deficit, many times I have unemployed workers. We can see those numbers during COVID, but the skills I need them to be in to come into the space ecosystem, there's a mismatch. So how are we partnering with universities and community colleges and technical schools to get individuals reskilled and upskilled? So this can be our adult workers, right? Reskilling and upskilling, as well as our young students who or maybe are in high school, but they need to graduate high school with not only a diploma, but an opportunity into a job. And then again, unlocking that innovation. How can we take all those thousands of patents at NASA, Air Force Research Labs, Department of Energy, ESA, commercialize them and bring them to market? One, by doing that as an entrepreneur, you create a job for yourself, but you also create jobs for others. And that creates economic opportunity in your community to help grow your community. So that's why the Space Foundation created our Center for Innovation and Education. It's all about that lifelong learning platform for workforce development and economic opportunity. And we look at students, teachers, entrepreneurs, and professionals coming into that space ecosystem. So I will say I am looking at Tim. So in case you have a question, relay it to Tim. He can flag me down and I can answer your questions as well. So we're looking at the Space Foundation as well as Tim and Foundation for the Future. We're looking at today's workforce. How do we reskill and upskill today's workforce and fill those critical jobs in our government agencies, in our businesses, in those entrepreneurial areas? And then we're looking at how are we creating that pipeline of workers for the future? Because between now and 2030, a number of jobs are going to go away. New jobs are going to come on board. Technology is going to change. So we are right now in the pipeline of K through 12, creating students, future workers for jobs that don't exist. How do we create that mindset? How do we create that lifelong learner who's going to come out of high school, go to college, and enter a job they may have never known existed? And how the Space Foundation does our work, similar to today's event, is we like to partner. So thank you, Tim, for inviting me and the Space Foundation to join you today. We're honored to be here. We believe in partnerships. We have sponsorships. We apply for grants, fundraising, donations, and endowments. So at the Space Foundation, we do have a 5-step workforce development roadmap, how we approach all of our programs and partner with individuals and communities to create that workforce development and unlock economic opportunity. First is awareness, then it's access, training, connecting, and mentorship. Today is a good example of awareness, being out talking about what are the possibilities, what are available for the space ecosystem, and how everyone can find their place in the space ecosystem. The next step is access. How do we help individuals who want to come into the space ecosystem enter it? And is that, getting a patent from NASA, or is that taking a training course, which is the next step? Even though you want to come into the space ecosystem, maybe you need to have some reskilling and upskilling to do it. The next step is about connections, partnering with Tim and Foundation for the Future, coming to the annual Space Symposium, joining the New Gen or Space Generation Advisory Council, building those connections and your network. And the last step, which I really think is the first step, is mentorship. If you can find a mentor, many times a mentor can help unlock those other areas of awareness, access, training, and connecting. So this is how we do business at the Space Foundation. If you're looking to partner and how we move forward is you're on that gray dot that says Space Foundation. And you look out and tell me, who is the audience you're trying to reach? And again, we look at all those audiences I mentioned. Is it teachers? Is it young professionals? Is it entrepreneurs? And once we understand the audience you're trying to reach, then we look at what is the outcome? How do you measure success? If it's for entrepreneurs, are we measuring success? Are we able to network them into the space ecosystem with companies or government contracts? And how do we measure that success? Once we understand that, then we look at that outer circle and say, okay, now let's see if we can match you up with the program the Space Foundation has. Can we offer it completely to meet all your needs and requirements? Or do we partner with another organization like a university or an incubator to make sure we can bring, so that we can accomplish your goals and objectives? On the sides of the chart here are the 16 different sectors we consider to be part of the space ecosystem. I talked about precision agriculture, but also the Internet of Things. That is running on the infrastructure of space, manufacturing, public safety, telecommunications, transportation, finance. Our entire financial system runs on space, the whole fintech era. So that is how the Space Foundation looks at the space ecosystem and how we like to partner when we want to accomplish goals and objectives with you.
Hey, Shelly, a
Yeah,
quick
yes.
question. So you talked about the multi-step process where we're in the awareness talking about workforce and space, and that goes, it transitions and you move towards actually getting into the space economy. The question is, the barrier to entry to the space economy seems really high. Launching a rocket is expensive. Designing some cool new technology is hard. But it sounds like you're saying that is not a true perception. Is that right?
That is correct. I'll share one of our slides. One of the things we did, Tim, in 2019 is we partnered with the Department of Commerce Minority Business Development Agency. And our goal was to bring in more underrepresented groups. Although we partnered with MBDA, we opened our program up to minorities, women, entrepreneurs, as well as college students to come into the program and show them that there was a way into the space ecosystem. And we did this again following our workforce development roadmap by creating awareness in communities. So we did actually come to Montgomery, Alabama, not last year, but it was 2019, and did a program where we brought together the community to show that there is access points into this space ecosystem. What is the right training? So the Space Foundation on our website right now are 15 webinars that can help you understand what is the space ecosystem, how do you want to be part of it? And I'm going to tell you right now, being a space entrepreneur is very similar to being any kind of entrepreneur. Now, if you are looking to be a launch entrepreneur or outer space entrepreneur, there could be some unique challenges. And we do talk about that. And we also do a webinar series with entrepreneurs that talk about outer space. So we just did one with Austin Link. So I asked you Starfish Space. So he's doing orbital servicing. So I ask you to go ahead and check out those webinars and listen to some experts who are making that entry point into the space ecosystem. But again, what we're also looking for is you could be a manufacturer and creating a product, and that could be in the supply chain for another organization, for instance, aviation, and you could look at doing a business case to determine, should I open up another market into the space ecosystem? And we did have an individual who did just that. We also have other entrepreneurs, you know, Internet of Things is 5G and that area. There's a lot of opportunities there. So what I share with you, Tim, is yes, space. Many times people think of launching rockets or astronauts, but a lot of those patents at NASA and ESA and elsewhere are to unlock that technology here on Earth. So there could be some barriers to any entry, and that always requires good market research and understanding. But what I learned, I'm going to come back to our example with our space commerce entrepreneurship program that we offered. We gave several of our entrepreneurs scholarships to come and attend the 2019 Space Symposium. And the feedback we received was, it was a little daunting to come to it, 15,000 people, but we worked with them. We helped them come up with what was their plan for those 4 days. Who did they want to meet with? And they realized once they were there, they were accepted into the space ecosystem. So it may seem daunting, but what I always tell people to do, first of all, with COVID, a lot of times you can reach out virtually to organizations, Space Foundation, Space Generation Advisory Council, Foundation for the Future, and others, and start to build that connections into that space ecosystem. NASA has a great technology transfer office with individuals that will help you if you want to commercialize a patent, if you want to apply for a grant, a SBIR, Small Business Innovative Research Grant. So there are opportunities and there are individuals who will help you. SBA is there to help you in your areas. Manufacturers Extension Partnership Program is available. We also partnered with them in several states. So Tim, what I share with you are there are access points and there are organizations that will help you. And what I ask to do is, for starters, you're at a great place that could help many of those entrepreneurs in Montgomery, Alabama.
No, I think that answers it perfect. That, there's a barrier to entry to anything, whether you're starting a franchise or building the next generation rocket. And so the first step is taking that first step.
Well, and some of the people we interview, the next webinar will be coming up on our entrepreneurial series is with Kieran Chin, and she's a marketing expert, and we have a couple marketing experts. Sometimes entrepreneurs think they create the best product in the world, and they do. Now the question is, does somebody else want to buy it? And that makes it the difference between creating something you're passionate, that's a hobby, and creating a business. And sometimes that's why when you're an entrepreneur, it's good to hire someone who can maybe do the business side of it, and you do the passion side as the entrepreneur. So we talk about that. We do have those 15 webinars on our website, spacefoundation.org, and we talk about marketing, finance, protecting your IP, cybersecurity, and those are good for any entrepreneur, whether you want to be in the space business or any type of business. So Tim, I don't see you coming off mute, so I'll just take that as I'm going to keep on. Thank you. Another program we have is our Junior Space Entrepreneurship Program. So again, I talked about earlier in my slides, we're creating the next generation of really innovators, entrepreneurial thinkers. And that doesn't mean that every child coming out of high school or the universities are going to be entrepreneurs. But as I shared with you, we are creating a generation that the jobs that they're thinking they might want may have changed or gone away, and new jobs have replaced them. And new jobs now, with technology transitioning so quickly, are going to continually need to be reskilled and upskilled. So we have to create a mindset in our workforce of the future of being entrepreneurial and innovative, whether they're in that for a company or they decide to become an entrepreneur. So our Junior Space Entrepreneurship Program does just that. We partnered with Lockheed Martin, NASA, and Junior Achievement. And our goal was for kids to learn our space-inspired curriculum, because space-inspired curriculum has to be in the classroom so we can show the variety of careers. We include that with 21st century skills. How do you work with others? How do you communicate? What are leadership skills? And then what are the STEM skills? So in this program, students learn they're on a team, and they're like NASA, and they are developing a rocket. So they could be a company, and they're taking that rocket and they're doing a Mars mission, and then they're safely returning back to Earth. But once they return back to Earth, then they change hats, and now they become a commercial company. And they have to take something that they learned from going to Mars and returning safely and now commercialize it. And now each student is part of a company. Are they the marketing officer? Are they the CEO? Are they the technology officer? And they're creating that they're learning how to collaborate and communicate, and they're learning about business as as well. So they're learning the STEM and the math and the science of Mars, but they're also learning how to commercialize products and what it means to work in a company. And then they get to pitch these ideas. And sometimes companies like to use some of these students to become interns as well. And of course, if you decide that one of these great students is an intern for you, sometimes that can be the pathway for them to someday work for your organization. And again, we used our 5-step workforce development roadmap here of awareness, access, training, connecting, and mentoring. I talk a lot about mentoring because many times finding a mentor is that first step. And there are 3 types of mentors. There's mentors, and I'm going to use my baseball analogy. That's like the batting coach. They're focused primarily in one area. So if you really wanted to learn about marketing, you could find a mentor who could help you with marketing. Then there's coaches, and that's more like the baseball coach, the overall coach. That's more about life skills and how do I overall become a better leader, a better manager, a better entrepreneur. And then there's champions. And the champion could be like the general manager or the owner of the baseball team. The champion is several levels up from you, but they can help position you for success, whether it's the next job or meeting that investor or other activities. So you always want to look for mentors, coaches, and champions. These are some of the organization both the Space Foundation and I are partnered with. I was just selected for a second year to be a UN Office of Outer Space Affairs Space for Women mentor. There's Space Generation Advisory Council. There's Women in Aerospace, Women Tech Network, Toad Air, and Women's Global Gathering at Symposium, as well as our New Gen program. Although many of those items say women in them, they are open to men and women. So they need men and women as mentors, and they need men and women to be mentees as well. I talked about Space Symposium 365, which is our year-round symposium activities to keep you connected. And again, how you can contact us. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn at any time. So Tim, that kind of wrapped up I'm going to say the formal presentation, and I appreciate the one question, and I'm here to answer any more questions, or I'll stand by as Bill goes through his slides and see if there's any topics Bill and I can banter back and forth.
Yeah, thank you, Shelly. The main follow-up was, so as we look to a future space workforce, and I'm sure Bill will get into this, and so this might be a useful jumping off point for him, but reskilling labor in many cases seems like the quickest path. And do these, whether it's the mentor groups or some of the webinars and content offerings, do they speak to that, or is that still a gap?
So there are a number of ways of filling that gap. In the Space Foundation, we're currently exploring how we want to fill that gap, whether it's with there are manufacturing opportunities, or is that reskilling and upskilling with certificates and degrees. So there is a gap, but there are programs. For instance, in California, there are many community colleges that offer the certification for advanced manufacturing. So an individual could go through high school, graduate high school, and walk into a manufacturing job, or another individual could reskill and upskill. Right now, they are filling those programs and they're over full. So we need more of those. And then the other thing is the amount that they're graduating, they need way more individuals than those community colleges can graduate. So for instance, a community college that I know in California, SpaceX or Northrop Grumman could take all the students they graduate every year. So just one company could take everybody that one community college could graduate. So we need more community colleges reskilling and upskilling certification programs. Another big area is data analytics. During COVID, there were a number of companies that were offering certificates in data analytics. Alteryx was one of them. So individuals that were displaced by COVID could come online, get reskilled, get that certification in data analytics, and come into a new job. So there are a number of companies that are now creating those reskilling, upskilling programs. And again, the Space Foundation is out there looking at how do we help collaborate and partner to create those reskilling and upskilling programs. Because the other thing I've learned, Tim, and you're familiar with this, is I have a lot of people who've always been space enthusiasts, right? We know back 40 years ago, if you wanted to be in space, you had to be a rocket scientist or an astronaut. But now, because space is now democratized, I need everyone. I need former executives from the oil and gas sector. I need former salespeople from the healthcare industry. And I am seeing now, I don't want to call them middle aged because I wouldn't call them middle aged, but mid career that are saying, you know what? I always wanted to be in the space sector. It wasn't possible 40 years ago, but now it is. How do I get in there? How do I find a mentor? So the other thing I share with you, Tim, is there are a lot of mid-career individuals that are highly skilled, and we need to welcome them into the space sector, and we need to help them tweak their skills, because a salesperson for medical devices can easily learn sales for space sector. So we just need to help them retool their skill set a little bit, and then they can re-enter into the growing space ecosystem. So I wanted to share a couple examples of when I talk about reskilling, how we're going to look at it in the future, but it's even happening right now.
Yeah, I think that's really well said, Shelly. Thank you. And now, as we transition to Bill Britton, the Chief Technology Officer for California Polytechnical University, I just want to highlight that space is a critical piece of the US economy, national security architecture, and in many senses, we are looking at a sector of the economy that looks like the internet in the 90s, where it seems like a fad. It's cool, shiny, exciting, but we're not really sure what to do with it. And Bill lived some of that heartburn and friction of transitioning from this is a thing kids do for fun to no kidding, this enables every facet of our life. And so I'm excited to hear more from him. And over to you, Bill.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Shelly, because that's an excellent setup for kind of what I'm trying to do here today, which is to deliver the message of content of why is what Shelly just told us so critical to get right, so that as we go to the future, we have the workforce to get there. So let's start with the slides. I've got 3 slides for you today. The first one I want to kind of, before I jump in, I want to talk about something that's really kind of unique here. If we think about the effects of COVID and what it did to us, one of the things that it created was this virtual concept where we're all in different locations working together. And I would argue that virtual is space, that when we're dealing with someone either in a space platform or on the moon or in Mars, it's going to be a virtual world. And so we have to find a way to enhance this virtual communication. That's a skill set. That's a need for the future. That's something we have to better enable. You know, we're going to be doing command and control virtually in the future. So we're going to have multiple sites doing the command and control, which is what they used to do in the old days, but that was analog. Now we're talking about the speed of light, digital, and all the elements that go with it. So as we talk about this digital world, as Tim referenced, this thing called cybersecurity, it didn't sneak up on us, because when the internet was invented, cybersecurity kind of started in parallel, and it's had many name changes as it's gone along. But what it did is it showed us that a digital technical area of expertise morphs over time. And in some cases, morphs so rapidly you can't keep up. We used to hear about Moore's law and how it affected computers and such. Now what we're seeing is that this technical world is changing so rapidly. The workforce needs to really kind of keep up with it. So if I will, give me a second here. Let's talk about, we keep saying this thing workforce. Well, what is workforce? What does that really mean? Well, workforce, if you really think about it, you boil it down, workforce, or a shortage in workforce, is the shortage in the skills and experience necessary to support an operating area, either be in engineering or research or actual operations. And so it's having the right number of people with the right skills. And one of the things that we've seen in the movement in cybersecurity is the right experience, not just the skills. So it's not just getting the cert, but then being able to employ the cert, the certification in that area of expertise. So this is where space can really learn from what we've seen in cyber. So let's kind of go over it. Even though we have been growing the cyber workforce in just an amazing effort across the United States, we saw a record number of cyber attacks last year at all levels, to include a pipeline, to include universities, to include government agencies. So we have not achieved yet the number we need to be successful. So again, the corollary here to space is, how do we achieve that number? And oh, by the way, if we accept the definition that a workforce shortage is the shortage in the skills and experience necessary. And actually in space, we haven't even defined what some of those skills are. By definition, we have a workforce shortage. So we've got to start working on this today, because as you see, and we're pouring lots of money into providing education opportunities for cyber. So we look at the next one. This ought to scare you. 80% of senior IT security leaders believe their organizations are not equipped to handle cyber threats. The next number, and when we reference CyberSeek, it's an organization that helps correlate jobs, the jobs in cybersecurity. This doesn't account for all of the space undefined cyber skill set jobs yet. So that's 462,000 jobs open in the current market space. So if you roll that out and you add that to cyber and space, that number exponentially grows. So what am I saying is wow, we've got to do something different. So what Shelly was referencing is something different. What other organizations like MGM Works, like Foundation Future, they're all saying the same thing, which is we've got to change now the perspective on where we're going and how we're getting there. And in some cases, we won't know what that workforce is until we see it. That's the scariest part of this equation. Now, again, there are some ways to reapproach this and to look at this and develop skills and competencies. And I think that's a lot of what Shelly mentioned in her references is the skills and competencies necessary to support space. But if you look at kind of how have we done in cyber to date? Reality is the United States workforce is both under-equipped and under-resourced to deal with the data breaches, leaks, phishing scams, ransomware. So the technology and the ability to attack it has outpaced our ability to support it. Now, again, I'm not saying gloom and doom for space. I'm just saying, look what happened when we had a rapidly developing area of technology and what it did and how we responded. So we kind of responded with a traditional response mechanism. So if we can go to the next slide. There we are. Thank you. So some of the things that we could look at doing is really around the innovation concept, around a cyber workforce for space. So competencies, and this is very similar to the trend slide that Shelly pointed out, but really there's three areas that the technology is really driving us to, and that's digital literacy. And that's the digital world we live in and work in. So all elements of space will have a digital component to it. If we understand how that digital world works, the ebbs and flows of the digital nature, how systems correlate with each other, and understanding that digital generates a lot of measurable data. So next, you got to figure out how you're really going to address all of that data, which is both analytics and all the other aspects, but really it's about understanding cloud and cloud literacy, the ability to use cloud as you do things as into the space arena. One of the elements that we talk about is the measurements of data that can be found in data streams or in relays. I mean, just everything that is associated with this digital space becomes an analytical data point for us to measure and evaluate. So as Shelly referenced earlier, digital analytics is going to just explode with this space opportunity. The last one is then, of course, cybersecurity. And if you add those three together, you really have some of the most basic competencies to go forward with for space. So what we saw with cybersecurity was a leaning towards just learn cyber. You didn't get the cloud part, you didn't get the digital part. You really focused in on cyber. And what we're saying is you really have to kind of change that dynamic. And so, what are we looking at? We're looking at things like programs around cloud training, cyber workforce, cyber research and training opportunities. And we really have to understand we have to start much earlier in the learning cycle. So suggesting where K through 12, absolutely. We have found that middle school students are really kind of the perfect place to start this conversation. They're excited about space. They're excited about other things. We hold a competition I'll talk about in just a minute, but basically students are allowed to work cybersecurity issues in a space-based scenario. This combination is kind of earth-shattering to them. They never realized that cybersecurity and space are tied together. So we have to move beyond the traditional space market, rocket engineer, spacecraft designer, that sort of thing, to, as Shelly said, a reference point. It's really all things that supports the space ecosystem. So again, what we've seen these efforts over the last several years for cyber in individual silos. Specifically by an organization or by an entity that supports that. We have to kind of try to change that dynamic. There's got to be a way that it's all tied collectively to understand, because as space evolves and changes, so will that training and educational opportunity have to evolve and change to the needs associated with it. Another thing that we've seen in this area is that do you need the 4-year, 6-year degree to be successful? And I think space will challenge that dynamic. One of the offshoots of COVID was that people learned that I can stay at home and I can learn and I can get this kind of training or I can get this kind of education. So how is space going to adapt to that virtual learner, that person who has now accelerated their learning experience to a virtual opportunity? So these are all changes that space will have to ingest, be able to figure out how to associate with what we're doing and where we're going to go with. So kind of what we're doing at the university. Next slide. So it really, we believe in a learn by doing, so experiential learning. One of the things that we have seen, and I don't care what level you're at, is if you take a certification and it's a computer-based certification and all the interaction you have is between you and your instructor, there is a high likelihood that an employer will not hire you because you don't have the experience. So remember, workforce shortage is the skills and the experience. And so the kinds of things that we're seeing is a rapid need for a much more functional, range learning experience for cyber cert skills or any cert skills that are done online, so that the experiential can be evaluated, tested, measured, metriced for the employer to look at and see and experience themselves. So that learn by doing has really fallen over, not just for our university students, but also into all the other things that we're doing. Some of the things that we're doing in that, our reach out, much as partnering, as was mentioned earlier, is offering this experiential learning through our clubs and through our centers, through our opportunities to work with K through 12 and other organizations. So you kind of have to change the conversation again and add that experiential learning aspect to the certifications, so that you're not just doing a range. You're doing a range that correlates to space. You're doing a range that correlates to the area that the employer, the agency will be utilizing. That's going to take a pretty big shift in how we educate today. And I think, again, cyber has taught us these lessons, and we really need to pay attention and focus on those. I think the last part of this, which is so critical, is the whole partnership aspect. The picture we have displayed here is a really kind of cool story. Cal Poly was one of the first universities to build, launch CubeSats. And so our students are building, designing, building, launching command and control CubeSats. That's a learn by doing that will pay off. They're not all engineering students. There are business students. There's liberal arts students. So again, it's about employing that experiential, no matter what your chosen degree area is, and working towards that same common goal of understanding how I experientially can work in that workspace. So if there's anything we've learned from cyber is there's not enough of us cyber experts out there to do the job today. Space will complicate that significantly. Another area that we've learned is, we've talked to several hiring agencies in space and spacecraft design and space support. And in order to better educate students, we've asked repeatedly, what are you looking for a student to know? What do you want them to have in their skill set when they come to you? Critical thinking is always one of the conversation pieces, which we love because we believe that's something we really focus on. But the next one kind of conversation goes along the lines of, well, I'll see it when I meet them. When I get to interact with them, I'll understand that. And so again, what are we creating? How are we helping the students, be they K through 12, be they community college, or be they late learners? How are we helping them to understand that virtual experience is so critical now to their hiring opportunity? So again, I think there's just a lot of paradigms that are associated with cybersecurity that we can learn from. Cybersecurity is continuing to build and change, and there are so many different ways that you can get it into that market. And I think that we have to learn from those experiences as we go into space. So with that, Tim, I'm going to open up the floor and go for questions, or just hold back and wait for your part, and we can then do the whole panel.
Yeah, one of the comments that I had that related to starting now, if there's any school board officials or curriculum evaluators that are on the webinar right now, they are crying into their coffee right now at the idea that there needs to be a curriculum before we know what the curriculum needs to be. And how can that gap be bridged?
So again, what we've seen is if we can work on these competencies, such as digital literacy, cloud literacy, and cyber literacy, those are the door openers to diving into the specific skills that are associated with either a cyber career or other areas. So it's really about kind of stepping back to the 100,000-foot level and saying these critical thinking skill sets in specific literacy of digital literacy, cloud literacy, cybersecurity literacy are the entryways. They're the portals by which, if I start down this path, I can develop the curriculum later that goes into the more in-depth session of I need to have this particular skill set.
Yeah, and I think treating it like the sort of software model that you're getting at is important, because it is going to evolve, and it's going to evolve fast in many cases. And so having the curricula that focuses on core outputs rather than SAT scores.
Yeah, Shelly mentioned it. I've said the word, the innovation part. Unfortunately, it's really not a taught skill, it's a learned skill. And so innovation will be critical in space. Again, remember, when you're in a digital environment, your time of useful consciousness, your time to decide something is significantly reduced. You have to have an answer fast. And so that innovative element has to be available in that employee, that learner, that person that's executing those missions. So now, one of the things that we're going to do is in all of these skill sets, we're also going to be developing artificial intelligence, machine learning, all the right attributes that help us do a better job, so we don't have to be everything. So if we do achieve AI and machine learning to the levels we're expecting, then I can take someone with less experience to run that environment, because I'm now really monitoring the environment, not owning, operating, and controlling. And so again, we change skill set needs and experiential needs, which means our workforce shortage changes also.
Yeah, no, I think that's Excellent way of looking at it. And I want to use that to transition to this idea that the workforce for the future is not a single thing. It is like us, a collection of skills, requirements, needs, and we have to be able to adapt to that as we go forward. I like putting up this slide here, where if you're a marketing professional or otherwise read about change management, you've seen these before, but in essence, Shelly talked about this, where there's coming a point where the space community has to live up to its expectations, and there's a handful of ways that that can go wrong. We saw it did go wrong after Apollo, where some of the innovation potential and momentum seemed to drop off. And that could have been a lack of public interest, a lack of financing. I'm told scholars will debate that for generations. But the point is, we're at a point where there is a lot of excitement about space, and we need the backbone to support that excitement and deliver on those expectations, or we face a long slog back to this point as the public gets disillusioned, or we're unable to bridge the gap in workforce development, specifically for here. And that gets to the problem right now. Both Shelly and Bill have talked about this, that space workforce development is not one size fits all. It's not a single thing that just happens. Right now and for decades, space workforce development was a government-initiated program, or government-led, mainly through the NASA Space Grant program, and it was geared towards developing what NASA needed: the rocket scientists, the engineers, and the like. And that was great. That worked, because when you're launching every other year, when you are the sole launch provider in the country, you get to dictate what the workforce development pipeline looks like. But now, as space economically has been democratized, and as we are continuing that exponential curve, what about the rest? In every other sector of the economy, we have a base at the workforce pyramid. The people who make things, who figure it out, who adapt the sort of theoretical to the practical, and it works its way up in the pyramid scale and the number of people that sector needs to the rocket scientist equivalent. I like to say that the logo for the Foundation of the Future with the inverted triangle speaks to the way the space workforce is now. It's resting on this cadre of rocket scientists and engineers, because that's what we perceive are the space workers. And it's not true. And as you've heard today, there is a lot already happening to build out, to accelerate, and to move forward this idea of workforce development for the rest of us. And what we at the Foundation for the Future are looking to do, in partnership with others throughout the education and space communities, is enable a true kindergarten to space development pathway. I used to say pipeline. Turns out that sounded like we were taking a kindergartner and sending them to orbit, which my kindergartner would have loved, but most evidently do not. And the idea is that we need to, at the earliest ages, be telling our kids, this next generation, that space is real, space is possible. And it's not something that they need a gold medal in the Olympics and then run for president in order to be selected for the astronaut program. They can do what they love in, around, and for space, whether that's art, whether that's welding. We need it. And I think what Shelly and Bill have talked about really amplifies that point. And what we at the foundation are looking to do is take what works. That NASA Space Grant Consortium works. There's a 50-state network of schools who lead the grant distribution for each state and help coordinate the activities of this STEM-focused workforce development nationwide. And what we're looking to do is, building off that model, develop a similar network that can crowdsource a lot of this educational content. A welding certification for space doesn't need to be different in Washington State or Florida. A robotic technician repair certification doesn't need to be different, other than for the different types of robots. And so in that sense, we have the opportunity to build this content, these certifications once, and not have to customize it to every single place. And in that way, we can democratize access to upskilling and reskilling programs nationwide. And in many cases, these programs exist. They may not exist with that name. In some cases, they do. Shelly talked about a number of these sorts of programs that already exist and the Space Foundation is doing. And so that brings the need to be getting the public aware, making that kindergartner, the parents of that middle schooler, or that child about to graduate from high school realize this is a real thing to do. I can really take this and run. And our model, I'm told every pitch deck needs to include the business model slide as a required component, and being former military, I am very good at doing what I'm told with slide formats. And I've already sort of addressed the space grant model, but this is a chance to get workforce development right. You hear from a lot of us in the space community about how space represents a chance to reset humanity's relationship to a number of different facets of our existence. In this case, it's a chance to get preparing a workforce to live, work, adapt to the harshest environment known to man. I'm from Alaska. I know harsh environments, but prepare them in such a way that it does breed and generate this cohort of people who have the requisite skills, the critical thinking, the adaptability, the innovation potential, and build off that going forward. And so the often asked question whenever you are pitching any product to any organization for funding is, who's the customer? Why should we buy this? And I have a delightful time going back and forth with a frequent contributor to our other event series, Michael Mealing from Starbridge Capital. And when he asks, who's the customer? In some cases, I tell him they haven't been born yet. I'll come back and introduce you and have been. And this is one of those cases where there is a clear customer. Bill and Shelly both talked at different points about how SpaceX or other single companies can take an entire graduating class in certain community college programs. So there's a clear and present need. But there's also another customer that's not yet been born that we at the foundation are pushing to create, and that's the Space Corporation, which is an infrastructure development corporation for space. And so just like ROTC feeds the military with a ready set of leaders and workers, and the Space Grant Consortium feeds NASA's, this Workforce for the Future pipeline would feed into an economy enabled by new financial tools that the Space Corporation would deploy and enable the sustainable development of a workforce that can support a robust, sustainable space economy for everyone. We're in Alabama. Our last event was in Akron, Ohio. Before that, it was Scranton. And in every place we go, we ask our experts, how can this town play. And that's what this workforce program that we're talking about and what you've heard Shelly and Bill talking about is all about. Now, the workforce development program that we're discussing is not a, we can finish this overnight. No, in many cases, we need to take a phased approach to looking at this. The first, building out regional hubs. MGM Works here is a regional hub for innovation in support of Air University and other military components. And what that essentially means is they are the hub and there are spokes, whether it's military units or innovators or schools. And so building out a network of regional hubs that can serve as pathfinder schools, pathfinder organizations, to then move into phase 2 where we catalog the existing content. I talked with a young lady who is currently in college, but she kind of rose to prominence. Her name is Alyssa Carlson. She rose to prominence because she went to all the NASA space camps. And that wasn't the only thing. She decided at a very young age she was going to be an astronaut and dedicated the rest of her life to doing them. And she is a passionate, driven woman. But the fact of the matter is, it shouldn't be a huge achievement to be able to find the NASA space camps, apply to them, and get into them. That should be information that educators across the country have at their disposal, just like the soccer and football summer camps that already exist. This should be links on YMCA pages to space-related day camps for kindergartners up. And that catalog doesn't yet exist and needs to, both to enable those kids and educators to be able to talk about it, but also to know what we need. Once we know what we have, we know where the gaps are, and we know who is doing what, and where that can then be exported throughout the network. And that gets to phase 3, where the content is then created. So I talked a lot about this program with the Challenger Center. If you don't know them, they're an organization that runs facilities that let middle schoolers and other kids come into space missions and work as a team doing different jobs that are all interrelated, and the success of any one job depends on the other. And it's that learning by doing. The person growing the life-supporting plants is every bit as important as the pilot. And these kids learn that when all of a sudden missions will fail because they don't cross-talk. And their programs during COVID have been turned virtual in many places. And we've talked with them and others about how easy it becomes to turn a virtual program for a middle schooler into one for an elementary student or a college student. You change the scenario, but once you have the world, that the environment that the students are interacting with, now it's a matter of changing the script rather than creating from whole cloth. And that's what we talk about when we talk about creating exportable content. It's not just designing a proprietary tool or widget. It's about creating something that can be used in a variety of circumstances. Because ultimately, that's what we're trying to teach the students, is the duct tape in the corner is also good for stopping your oxygen from leaving your spaceship. And so we're trying to model the same thing we're teaching them. And so as I start to close out, I want to bring up this slide about how you on the webinar here in person can get involved. So we at the foundation are building a coalition of formal members. In many cases, these are paying companies who support our mission because they believe in it, because we are able to deliver value to them. And we're excited to have members as far away as Australia and as close as just outside DC. And we need more of you, not just because we are a member-supported organization, but because we don't have all of the good ideas and all of the knowledge yet. And so we need those and we want more of those. The second part is our advocacy. So that's a huge component of this effort and others we're doing is educating congressional leaders, some of whom are on this webinar now, educating them on space is now, space is needed, and if we fail to act, others will. We didn't get to where we are as a nation by letting others lead. We took chances, we made mistakes, and at the end of the day, we may have fallen 7 times, but we got up 8. And that's what we're delivering to Congress, and we need your help, whether it's individually, whether it's corporately, or it's just having ideas about what we could be doing better with our messaging. And finally, referrals. You know people we don't. Can you introduce us to them? We probably want to know them if you want to introduce us. And so that goes back to not having all the right people, not having all the right ideas. And we need it. Because at the end of the day, we are trying to convince both Congress and the public that space is here to stay. And as marketing theory teaches us, when you have to bridge a gap between what is perceived as impossible, but that you know isn't, you need far more than just a credible argument. You need to come in with a super credible case. And that's only possible when we're doing it, not I. I'm going to hand it back to Trent Edwards to close out. This is my contact information. After every one of these events, I will get half dozen or more of you reaching out, asking questions, providing introductions. Please continue. I am better for having received your input, and as longtime viewers see, so is what we're presenting. So thank you. Trent?
Great. Tim, thank you very much. This has been very inspirational. I want to just thank Tim for everything that he's doing and Foundation for the Future to make us more aware and to educate us on the opportunities in space. To Shelly and Bill, wow, what an inspirational conversation. Thank you for your commitment, and we look forward to partnering with you. This is a strategic imperative. This is an important moment in time. And so we're really proud that Montgomery has this place of making history, right? Just think about that. Montgomery is a city with a history of making history. And it started in 1910 with the Wright brothers when they stood up the first civilian flying school at Maxwell Field. And even during that time, as people saw this thing flying in the air, they just couldn't believe it. And so the Wright brothers tried and failed and tried and failed, but they stuck to it. And despite all odds, we have flight. We have that same moment in time. This city, through the Montgomery bus boycott movement and the march from Selma to Montgomery, has that history of making history. And so we are excited to partner as we make new history, develop the workforce for the future that allows us to compete in space, partnering with Air University, all those bright young minds from captains to majors to lieutenant colonels and generals that come here, and just know that we are open for business. If you have ideas, we will partner with Tim, we will partner with you. We're that collaboration and innovation hub. And so from the governor to the lieutenant governor, our members of Congress, Mayor Reed, our city leaders, community leaders, we are here and we are ready to partner and get after it, because it's too important not to be a success or not to succeed in this great endeavor. So thank you again for being with us. Thank you for allowing us to host it right here, Tim. Look forward to working with you and partnering with you.
Thanks,
Thank
Trent.
you very much.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Once again, thanks, Bill. Thanks, Shelly. Phenomenal presentations. And these are examples of the partnerships and that we at the foundation are honored to have made. And we're excited to see what more comes from events like these. Take care and see you out there.